Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Brilliant Bankers, where you can expect in-depth classes on exams conducted by IIBF. Myself Jishma, and today we'll be starting with Module B in Prevention of Cybercrime and Fraud Management. So next we are going to see what is cyber fraud. So what is cyber technology? Most banks in India have migrated to core banking platforms and have moved transactions to payment cards like debit card, credit card, electronic channels like ATM, so internet banking and mobile banking. Fraudster also followed customers into the space. However, this response of the most banks to frauds in these areas needs further improvement, thereby avoiding putting the entire onus to the customer. There is a lack of clarity amongst the bank on the reporting of these instances as fraud. So a need is there felt to have an industry-wide framework on fraud governance with particular emphasis on tackling electronic channel-based frauds. This note endeavors to bring out the challenges and suggest a framework which can be implemented across bank to effectively tackle the electronic fraud menace. So it will be useful for you to recall the definition of fraud at this stage. So what is fraud? A deliberate act of omission or commission by any person carried out in the course of a banking transaction or in the books of accounts maintained manually or under computer system in banks, resulting into wrongful gain to any person for a temporary period or otherwise, with or without any monetary loss to the bank. So this definition has been recommended as para 9.1 of the report of the study group on large value bank frauds set up by the Reserve Bank of India in 1997. It follows that, like other bank frauds, various IT related frauds needs to get captured through the fraud reporting system, and banks should take adequate steps to mitigate such risks. The next is roles and responsibilities and organizational structure for fraud risk management. So Indian banks follow the RBI guideline of reporting all frauds above 1 crore to their respective audit committee of the board, that is ACB. Apart from this, banks are also putting up a detailed annual review of frauds to their audit ACB. The board for financial supervision of RBI has observed that in terms of higher governance standards, the fraud risk management and fraud investigation must be owned by the bank CEO, ACB, and the special committee of the board. Special committee of the board for monitoring large value frauds. Banks are required to constitute a special committee for monitoring and follow up cases of frauds involving amounts of rupees 1 crore and above. While the committee ACB may continue to monitor all the cases of frauds in general. Most of the retail cyber frauds and electronic banking frauds would be values of less than 1 crore and hence maybe not attract the necessary attention of the special committee of the board. Since these frauds are in large number and have the potential to reach a large proportions, it is imperative that special committee of the board be briefed separately on this to keep them aware of proportions of the fraud, modus operandi, and the steps taken by the bank to mitigate them. The special committee should specifically monitor and review the progress of the mitigating steps taken by the bank in case of electronic frauds and the efficacy of the same in containing fraud numbers and values at least on a quarterly basis. The next, we have a separate department to manage frauds. The activities of fraud prevention, monitoring, investigation, reporting, and awareness creation should be owned and carried out by an independent group in the bank. The group should be adequately staffed and headed by a senior official of the bank. So he can be below the rank of, should not be below the bank rank of general manager. Next is fraud review councils. So the fraud review council should be set up by the above fraud risk management group within various business groups in the bank. The council should comprise of head of the business, head of the fraud risk management department, and the head of operations supporting the particular business function, and the head of the information technology supporting that business function. The council should meet every quarter to review fraud trends and preventive steps taken by the business group. and and to report the same to the special committee. Next is components of fraud risk management. So we have a few components for fraud risk management. So first is fraud prevention practices. That is a strong internal control framework is the strongest deterrence for frauds. So the fraud risk management department, along with the business operations support groups, continuously reviews various systems and controls to remove gaps, if any. And to strengthen the internal control framework, we have some practices that has been followed and recommended for banks to prevent for fraud preventions. So those are fraud vulnerability assessments. So the fraud vulnerability assessments should be undertaken across the bank by the fraud risk management group. Apart from the business and the operation groups, such as assessment, also cover channels of the bank such as branches, internet, ATM, and phone banking, as well as international branches, if any. During the course of vulnerability assessment, all the process should be assessed based on their fraud risk. Controls need to be checked and improvement suggested for tightening the same. So this should be reviewed in the fraud review councils. So we have a few steps to review this in the fraud review councils. First one is mystery shopping. Mystery shopping is an important constituent of vulnerability assessment. The transactions are introduced in live scenarios to test the efficacy of controls. The result of the mystery shopping exercise should be shared with the relevant groups in the fraud review councils and be used for further strengthening of controls. Next is review of new products. So no new product or process should be introduced or modified in a bank without the approval of control groups like complaints, audit, and fraud risk management groups. The product or process needs to be analyzed for fraud vulnerability and fraud loss limits to be mandated wherever vulnerabilities are noticed. Next is fraud loss limit. All residual or open risk in products and process need to be covered by setting fraud loss limits. So fraud loss limits need to be monitored regularly by the fraud risk management group, and review needs to be undertaken with the respective business group when the fraud loss amount reaches 90% of the limit set. In case it is difficult to set a fraud loss limit, a limit on the total number or a total value of frauds may be defined. For this purpose of deciding how much a product or a process has used up the limit set, the cumulative value of fraud in that product or process during the financial year need to be considered. Next is root cause analysis. All actual fraud costs above 10 lakhs and cases where a unique modus operandi is involved should be reviewed immediately after such a fraud is detected. The findings should be used to redesign the products and process and remove the gaps so that they do not recur. Next is data security, data information or system security. Most of the banks have incorporated several security measures for their documents, information, system, and customer deliverables, such as checkbook, debit cards. Security measures have also been incorporated during delivery of instruments, such as cards or check, or books or internet passwords to the customers through couriers. Internet banking systems have security features such as separate transaction passwords, two-factor authentication, multi-channel process for registering payees, upper limit on transaction value, and SMS alert to the customers. So it is also necessary that customer confidential information and other data information available with banks is secured adequately to ensure the fraudsters do not access it to or intrude fraudulent transactions. Appropriate steps need to be taken to ensure data, information, or system security at the bank, as indicated early in the report. So, information security and appropriate access control procedures ensures that only employees who are required to know particular information have access to the same and can put through the transactions. Further, bank system need to be adequately secured that No unauthorized persons carry out any system modifications or changes. Appropriate verification procedures should be incorporated at all channels, such as phone, banking, ATMs, branches, and internet, to ensure that only genuine transactions are put through. All the above security measures should be under continuous review for further strengthening. So, next is KYC, that is, know your customer. A strong KYC process is the backbone of any fraud prevention activity. Such a process enables bank to prevent unscrupulous elements from gaining entry into the bank's environment, which gives them an opportunity to carry out their fraudulent intentions. Gaining entry into the bank's environment, which gives them an opportunity to carry out their fraudulent intentions. Similarly, appropriate due diligence procedures before recruitment of employees and vendors is essential to prevent non fraudsters or people with fraudulent motives to have access to the bank's channel. Banks have to implement strong procedures to carry out due diligence of potential customers, employees, and vendors before they are enrolled. Next is physical security. All banks have dedicated team to take care of the security of the physical infrastructure. This team should conduct regular security audits of various offices to check for deviations, lapses. It is the responsibility of the team to ensure that physical assets and data copied on magnetic optical media do not go out of the offices of the bank without authorization. Next is creating a fraud awareness amongst the staff and the customers. Awareness and on how to prevent and detect frauds is the basis on fraud management. Bank needs to adopt various measures to create awareness amongst the staff and customers. So in that, we have to see fraud detection. So how you can detect the fraud activities. First one is detection of fraud. Despite strong prevention controls aimed at fraud deterrence, fraudsters do manage to perpetrate frauds. In such cases, the earlier the fraud is detected, the better the chance of recovery of the losses and bringing the culprits to book. System triggers that throw up exceptional transactions, opening up channels that take note of customer or employee, alerts or disputes, seeding or mystery, shopping exercises, and encouraging employees or customers or well-wishers to report suspicious transactions or behaviors, or some of the techniques that are used for detection of frauds. The exceptional or the suspicious or the transaction or activities reported through these mechanisms should be investigated in detail. Next method is transaction monitoring. Banks should set up a transaction monitoring unit within a fraud risk management group. The transaction monitoring team should be responsible for monitoring various types of transactions, especially monitoring of potential fraud areas by means of which early alarms can be triggered. These units need to have the expertise to analyze transactions to detect fraud trends. This unit should work in conjunction with the data warehousing and analytics team within banks, or data extraction or filtering and sanitization for transaction analysis for determining the fraud trends. Banks should put in the place automated system for detection of frauds based on advanced statistical algorithms and fraud detection techniques. Next method is alert generation and redressal mechanism. Appropriate mechanism needs to be established in banks to take a note of the disputes or exceptions or suspicions highlighted by various stakeholders, including transactions, monitoring teams in banks, and to investigate them thoroughly. Banks should have a well-publicized whistleblowing mechanism. Next is a dedicated email ID and phone number for reporting suspected frauds. So bank can have a dedicated email ID and phone numbers for the customers to report any fraudulent activity that may notice. A dedicated team can be created to reply a customer queries and concerns through the above email IDs. So phone banking officers and branch staff should also be trained on response to these customers queries and concerns on frauds. Next is early detection mystery. Early detection. Bank's fraud management function is effective if it is able to minimize frauds, and when fraud occurs, it is able to detect them fraud so that the loss is minimized. So that's all for today's video. If you The next video we will see in next section, we'll be seeing about fraud investigation, reporting of frauds, customers awareness on frauds, employee awareness and training, incident management. So thank you for watching my video. If you like my video, please like, share, comment and subscribe to the video. So thank you for watching.